everyone. You're welcome to this edition of The Inside on Equinoxe Television, broadcasting from Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Babler Jonathan. Political leaders, human rights defenders in the Republic of Cameroon continue decrying gross human rights violations and abuse in the country. The Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party, has published a human rights situational report for Cameroon for the year 2021, and that report depicts an increasing violation of human rights, notably in crisis-stricken areas of the country, the northwest, the southwest regions of the country, where a socio-political crisis and armed conflict has been prevailing for close to 6 years today, but also in the far north region of the country with the fight against the Boko Haram insurgency, and added to that, crackdown, continuous repression on political leaders and civil society activists in the country. We're going to analyze all these, and in the meantime, teachers are also decrying the violation of their right to the reward due every worker as prescribed by the Labor Code in the Republic of Cameroon. Teachers have been working for several years in precarious conditions, deprived of their dues. Money owed them by the state of Cameroon not paid. Some have died without receiving a dime from the state of Cameroon, and the teachers have been out of their classrooms for 4 weeks now, demanding for concrete and visible solutions. And despite the measures taken and announced by government on the instructions of the President of the Republic, Paul Biya, the teachers are still skeptical. They want to see the concrete solutions. They want to see the money in their hands, and they are still pressing for solutions to their plight. Meet our guest in some few seconds. Our first guest in this edition of The Inside is Tayon Elvis. He's a journalist. He's also a politician, Deputy National Communication Secretary of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party. Tayon Elvis, you're welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Babler Jonathan. Special thanks to all those who have bothered to watch us today. And special greetings to Professor Maurice Kamto as the President-elect, and the entire crew of members and would-be members, including sympathizers of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement. And besides all, I think special greetings to all our militants and their families who are feeling the hard pain of the fact that most of them have been detained at the different detention centers across the country illegally. But above that, greetings to the people of Gonoko, Bekuda, and Royal Majesty Dr. Fomiki Waters, and a host of other Royal Majesties watching us right away. Right
to my right now, Song Derek, civil society activist and teacher. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babler Jonathan. It's always a pleasure being here with you to analyze situations that are plaguing this nation. And of course, a special greetings to all the viewers of Equinoxe Television. It's a pleasure to know you are glued to your TV set to listen what we have to analyze about today and happenings in Cameroon.
Right, we want to start with the situation of human rights in the Republic of Cameroon. Gross human rights violations documented by the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, and the document was presented to the public this week. A compilation of human rights violations recorded particularly in the crisis-stricken parts of this country, but also in other parts of the country, as far as the continuous crackdown on politicians of the opposition and civil society, as well as right defenders, is concerned. Tayon Elvis, tell us more about this.
Well, I think that for the time being, you realize that Professor Maurice Kamto, President-elect, has quite been putting in place a whole lot of issues as far as the concern for human rights violations in the country is concerned. You equally get to understand that we have made several moves, in which case party militants themselves have equally become victims. It's like you are advocating for the right of someone. For example, you say no to the war in the two restive areas. You say you demand accountabilities for the way AFCON projects are being managed, and while doing this, you become the victim. You don't get the point. So you're advocating for the rights of some persons, and at the end, you become the victim to pay for what you are advocating. And so at the long run of it, you realize that it has quite been a call for concern, because we realize that we have battery of lawyers. It's not by error, probably the fact that it's not probably out of our making. If I tell you that CRM party is the only political party in the history of Cameroon that has the highest number of advocates. And repeat, the highest number of advocates. Which
and
means,
despite the numbers you're talking about, there are several officials of the party and militants who are still in detention.
What's the
situation?
Well, their situation is precarious because we have more than 100 who are in the different detention cells. Alone in Douala, we have not less than 60 of them. We have a handful of them who are spread out in the prisons in Bafoussam, others in Yaoundé, and the other prison centers around the country. Now, their situation is a call for concern. If you see us mounting a move to put in place the press conference has arrived at in our last national executive meeting, which was chaired by Professor Maurice Kamto. You know, the move had been that Cameroonians should not be in the dark. Sometimes you realize that what we did was supposed to have been an assignment to be done by the Minister of Justice. Because if you have a Minister of Justice, at the end of every year, even before their judicial meetings in Yaoundé, they are supposed to publish the situation of the human rights, that's the human rights situation in the country. Now, since as they refuse to do that job, now we decided to take a comprehensive report of a 44-page document, which was presented by our National Secretary for Human Rights, Barrister Sikati. You'll get in the report, because when we're carrying out the report, we got, as usual, detractors, of course, who are always enemies to the party and enemies to the state, and who, wherever they are. We get to realize that there have always been the aspect of, now, why do we move on? Why do we have to do this? Now, if you look at the report, you discover that we put the report in a holistic base that takes into consideration the violation of the rights of the Cameroonian citizens, violation of the rights of the security forces, violation of the rights, you know, we took it all around, including even the violation of the rights carried out by Amber fighters. We equally went to the far north region and looked at the precarious situation. Now, you realize that in the 44-page document, I would tell you that we took time to work on that because that was what the party was able to get based on facts. That's why if you go through the report, we mention names, we mention scenarios, like the case of the gendarme officer in Boya who shot the child. His own right was violated because he too was killed by the crowd. The young toddler too was also killed. So we took time to mention that. But now you realize that
it's a compilation of violations and abuse of human rights. That report indicates a kind of upward
an increase
yes,
in geographic
the rate of violation and abuse of human rights.
Yes, if you look at it from the presentation of the first page to the 44th page, you realize that the situation shows that there is an increase, which means that as the days go by, we get more of those violations. And sometimes the violations come as a result of intimidation also by the state officials who are supposed to be at the forefront of guidance. So when you have a situation whereby people rule with iron fist, these things are bound to occur.
All right, but these things are bound to occur. Some Derek, what you take about this growing trend of violation and abuse of human rights in the country, in the crisis-stricken parts of the country, northwest, southwest, far north, and also across the board with the continuous crackdown on politicians of the opposition and civil society activists?
I see it as a calculated attempt to normalize what is abnormal, because what is happening is that there is an increase every day about this human rights violation. Like the kangaroo man said, both from the military, non-state armed forces, and in the far north with the Boko Haram. And I think there is a lot of focus of the military, especially in the northwest and southwest, a lot of focus of the military in that section of the country, while other parts are really neglected. And it is sad that those who are advocating, those who believe to be human rights advocates, are being cramped down. They are being locked up or being followed up to play the role of trying to fight for human rights. It is disheartening to know that a lawyer who is regarded as a human rights lawyer goes to fight for the rights of someone who does not have the power to fight, and the person is cramped down, the person is taken off. Then we start asking ourselves, if the lawyer cannot defend you, who then will salvage us? Who then will take us out of this precarious situation? If the lawyers that we so much believe, if the lawyers that we so much count on cannot have the authority, the power to stand and justify what is just, then indeed we are doomed. And it is because of a system that really lacks control. It really lacks checks and balances. Because if there were checks and balances, then we should know that what is most important, biblically, human life is sacred. Human life is sacred, and no one has the right to take away another person's right. And with the law, there are ways, there are procedures to follow up things. But the way it is done in Cameroon, it seems we are living in a jungle where it is the survivor of the fittest.
As we speak now, some of the lawyers who were defending detainees of the Anglophone crisis, Isiku, Ayuktabe, and all the rest who are detained in different detention centers across the country, have abandoned the case over what you're just talking about now, and over irregularities in the process. And one of them, Barrister Mungwa, was recently came under some kind of pressure from the administration and the judicial department, and arrested, detained, and things like that.
Like I said, it's a calculated attempt. The system knows that if things become irregular, people cannot support for that long. And because the lawyers cannot support, and the lawyers think that things should be right, they are leaving the court stands or the court rooms, or they are taking up their wigs because they feel like things should be done the right way. But I want to tell you that the government or the people in charge of these cases, they are happy because that is what they want to do. They want to drag them to their elastic limits, because people are in jail, and you will not imagine that human rights advocate lawyers, who are the only persons to pick them out of that jail, are being stretched to their ends because they want that they should give up. And when they give up, you see, that's why you have a lot of persons detained without problems. You have a lot of persons, Anglophones, especially the Anglophones, detained for a very long period of time without trials. I have a friend, not to call his name, but I have a friend that he was on his way to Nigeria as a businessman when this crisis started, 2016, because when they were on their way back from Nigeria, he was taken to Yaoundé straight until date. When we talk, sometimes you say they have never been taken to court, and we ask ourselves, what is the crime? And then they have no access to lawyers. It is that bad that you see people serving a lot of prison terms. They have served a long prison term that is not due them, and it's really appalling and disheartening.
Tayo Evis, from your findings, what is kind of promoting these ills, human rights violations and abuse? What is creating that enabling environment for this to continue growing in the society, in the Cameroonian society today?
Well, several factors account for that. You know, in a kangaroo system, things operate in a lackadaisical manner and sometimes move like a river without a particular direction. Now, if I tell you that when we have a system where we ruled, like we talk about, we ruled in the system like during the period of the French Revolution, where Louis XVI talked about l'état c'est moi. Now, it's the same scenario. Now, when you have the lack of separation of power, you have those type of things occur. You can't have a president of the republic who is the chief of the armed forces, is the head of the judiciary, in fact, is the head of everything. Now,
is it forbidden?
It is forbidden under the democratic practicals. Very, very. They are listening to me, they know what I'm talking about. Because it breaches the gap of, it breaches...
But that is state protocol in Cameroon.
Yeah, it is state protocol, but there's an error.
That is permitted by the Cameroonian legal system.
No, you could put a wrong law.
System
Yeah, very right. You could put a wrong law and you call it a legal aspect, which in real terms, it doesn't befit. Remember, the system of governance we have, that we call democracy, is a borrowed system of government. And if we are borrowing it, those with whom we are borrowing that system of government don't operate the way we operate. That's why I call it the kangaroo system. Because you can't tell me that once you have a system where the separation of power is absent, where the rule of law is absent, these are the two main aspects that leads to what we have.
Why do you think that the separation power is absent, whereas the judicial authorities and even the executive will tell you that there are clear-cut lines between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary?
Yes, they will tell you that theoretically. But if you go through the operations on the ground, for the fact that one man is chief of armed force, one man is head of judiciary, and one man is still the head of state, just as per that you find in the 1996 Constitution, it tells you that it operates as it is. Now, you can't tell me that in a case where a lawyer files habeas corpus, now it takes periods, uncountable adjournments, for somebody to be brought forth to be seen before the competent court. Now, you can't also tell me that we are told that criminal issues are liable to those who carry out the act, which means that if I'm already above the ages of 21 and above, I'm supposed to be liable to the crime I commit. Now, but in the kangaroo system, what do you find? That there is transfer of crimes, which means that if I am, for example, an amber fighter, and they are unable to get to me, the next thing is that they will get my mother, my father, my uncle, my aunt, and they bundle them all in.
The case of Conso Antoinette.
In the case of Conso Antoinette, you could imagine
who just had a relationship,
and currently living
at
with the husband and a woman
who at the time was not a separatist fighter. And they separated, and later he became a separatist fighter.
So if you look at it, you realize that we have a whole lot of issues that are going wrong. And why do I say so? It's because first we have this issue of one-man rule. Now, with the issue of one-man rule, it means that everything is decided at the whims and caprices of the man who mans the nation. And I tell you that when you have the absence of separation of power, where the judiciary cannot act as check and balance on the executive, and the executive cannot act as a check and balance on the legislature, it becomes a problem. And that's the more reason why you discover that any bill that leaves the presidency, that's from the executive, and is heading towards the National Assembly, that's the lower house, or the upper house, the Senate, it goes through. You don't get any objection because the function in the system that of what we call the majority in the power in the party. But then, if you go to like Ghana or Nigeria, there are bills that can get to the National Assembly, and if you are to the lower house, if you want to get to the upper house, they get tied there because some person will often not see it the way it's supposed to be. So from the centers of this, it tells you that one man is in control, and that's why the judicial system has been rubbish. You can't in any way tell me that you have countries in Africa that rubbish legal departments, lawyers as per se as we find in the country. You could be locked up arbitrarily. It's just suffice for somebody to say you are Amber, or for somebody to say he has connection with somebody, with some other person, and you are locked up. Worst of it, with the human rights abuses that we have, is the issue of holding persons incommunicado. It is the highest error and the highest human rights violation. That you arrest somebody in Bamenda, you arrest somebody in Wa, you arrest somebody in Furawa, you arrest somebody in Ekonotiti, and for weeks the relatives are dumbfounded. You move to the state council, you move to Jade, go to the police, and they say they don't know. Only for you to realize that the person is hiding somewhere in a dungeon, somewhere in Yaoundé, or somewhere in Boya, or somewhere in Douala. It tells you the kind of operations we have. And I think that if Cameroonians cannot be very honest enough to hold this, we keep telling them that when we started this issue, what happens to coffee, as they say in Pidgin, can also happen to cocoa. And it is until it touches A or B, you will not understand the magnitude of it. How do you explain to me that in the judicial system, most of the times you hear the judiciary tell you that their hands are tied? I have friends in the judiciary who will tell you that, you know, this issue is complicated. Finish. That's what they tell you. And I tell them, but you have the law in front of you. The texts are all in front of you. Why don't apply the text and let's see if it holds the person you are judging? And they will only tell you that no, la fesse est tellement compliqué.
Their hands are tied.
It tells you that everything is moving in a lackadaisical manner.
Okay, so Derek, Tayon is pouring all the blames on the authorities, but the authorities on their part are also pouring the blames on the armed fighters, for example, in the northwest and southwest regions, indicating or saying that they are the ones who are creating the enabling environment for violations and abuse of human rights, the insecurity, and so on.
Yes, Mr. Babila, I want to first of all tell you that the blame game will not help anybody. Both parties are committing human rights violation. That one, there is no debate about it. Both parties are committing. But the moment we keep dragging to the extreme ends, it will not help us. We know that like Mr. Faevi said, your colleague, Mr. Wazizi, was held incommunicado until date. It was only after pressure that we discovered that Wazizi had disappeared into thin air. Till date, nobody has known where he is. We are asking ourselves, yes, until your darling station revealed that Wazizi was nowhere to be found. Question: when you get someone who is a criminal, that person still has some rights, despite the fact that that person is a criminal, because where Wazizi was he was not proven to be a criminal. He was a suspect, so he still had the right to have access to his family. He had the right to communicate with friends. He had the right to communicate with a lawyer. But Wazizi got missing until his demise. We have seen situations where the armed faction have maybe chopped off people's hands, workers' hands in plantation, which is something we decry. We have seen children being killed. We have seen state officials being bombarded in cars. But if we go on with the blame game, nobody wins. In the blame game, nobody wins because there is justification. I want to announce to you that the government has a reason. They have the right to protect the territorial integrity of the country, and at the same time, the Anglophones, they have a right to self-determination, as stated by international law. They are a people. So if we keep justifying, you realize that there will be a lot of angers boiling. It is time for us to take time, to take compromise, to talk to each other, because you realize that at the extreme, the Anglophones have maintained that it is either a separate state or nothing, whereas the government has clinged on to a decentralization that never was and may never be. So it's we saw the major national monologue where the government spoke to itself.
The major national dialogue.
I maintain I'm responsible for my words. It was a one-man show, and that is why after the major national monologue, all the solutions proposed have not yielded. If you want to judge that the association or the gathering was successful, it is when the implementation of the decisions are yielding fruit. Today I want to announce to you that there are still guns smoking in the street. There are still people. Why people thought that things were coming down? That is the SDO, the mayor,
the DO of Equinoxe and the mayor,
and they are family people. They are the families. They are the lives of people. So there's a lot of experiment. We are playing. We are carrying out experiment on people's lives. You remember that there are still 7 or the guys that were kidnapped in a Kondo Titi, the delegates, 5 delegates or so. They are still not found till date. The families are crying, and they were serving the state. We are asking ourselves, where are they? And the government is still making no statement, and the armed separatists are still not making any comment to tell us whether they are alive or not. It is because of this blame game. Each party is trying to prove that they are right, but the disaster is falling back on the common man, is falling back on you and I, because we are those that pay the prices. Remember, when ministers, after the demise of the SDO in a Kondo City, the governor was there, but he was the governor was there to make sure that the situation is under control, as they will always say, right, and that he was there with armed men around him. After he leaves, what happens? Do we still go back to status quo, or we keep playing the blame game?
And some were expecting that the governor should not have gone there with an helicopter, but he should have taken the road taken by the DO.
Of course, to feel the pinch that everyone feels.
All right, Tayon Elvis, what do you think about the silence of government, for example, concerning the state officials who were abducted, one of them killed, until today, 5 of them Nobody knows what's happening with them. No official statement about them. And that's exactly what happened with the first government official who was killed in the context of this crisis, the DO of Batibo. It's only after a long period of time that the then Minister of Communication came out to say he died.
Yes, I think it's still another form of human rights abuse, because if I work for you as a state or as a corporation, my absence is supposed to show some concern on your part, and the concern should not only end on you probably making visits and saying everything is under control. It has to extend even to my own family members. I tell you, I visit Yaoundé regularly. I have a handful of widows who are in Yaoundé. Their husbands are security officers killed, but you don't find them. They don't find it easy, because we don't have an automated system whereby immediately your husband is killed, probably some money is calculated in an automatic system and given to you so that you can take care of the siblings and the people back home. And the fun is that each time an official dies, within 1 week, maximum 2, a replacement is done immediately. So you start asking yourself, could it be that the state too sometimes does not value the services offered by the state officials? And it's still another call for concern. Now, if you look, when we're talking about the issue of abuse of human rights, which takes a different dimension from even the presentation which we had over the weekend in Douala. Now, you look at it that the function of the government tells you that some persons are more important than the other. Now, look at this. How do you expect that Senator Kemende was assassinated in Bamenda? Now, the government did not make an official statement. Next day, some persons went to enjoy their lives in a nightclub in Bastos, and they had a fire incident and they died. The Minister of Communication made a statement. You get the point. The presidency made a statement. There was a whole concern.
They were on the scene.
They were on the scene. They even went there. So you start asking yourself, if Senator Kemende was assassinated, what caused even the Minister of Defense to move from Yaoundé to Bamenda to see that this senator was not a senator for himself, he was a senator for the nation? When you look at it, you realize that we have a semblance. Now look at the geo in Batibo, as he was taken by non-state armed actors, and shortly afterwards you had a replacement. Life has returned to normalcy. But you get to realize that it is far more getting to a concern that we think that in as much as both parties are involved in the aspect of human rights abuses, now the main issue is that the government should not intimidate persons who voice out these things. Because when they voice out these things, it's for the government to be reminded that they need to do more to curb the human rights abuses we're having. America has human rights abuses. If you take a look at the situation of Guantanamo Bay, there's no society of angels. But our main issue is that why would people be victims because they are pointing out human rights abuses? Now,
human rights defenders should not be targeted.
Should not be targeted. Lawyers should not be targeted.
Just like same for political leaders.
Should not be targeted.
What about the crackdown on political leaders that has continued too? With the last time Professor Maurice Kamto came to Douala, we saw a heavy deployment of security or security officers everywhere, almost hindering even some of the things that they came to do.
You know that if something is not important, you will not get flies around. So if you don't have a rotten meat around a particular area or something that can attract flies, you will not have flies there. Now, the issue with the CRM, it has first been a call for concern. As we said, from the testing on the ground, you can know which parties are opposition parties and which one are not. Taking from the election we had at the National Assembly, that how can a parliamentarian stand in when we had groups of parliamentarians who say they are opposition leaders? And Honorable Nenchi stands
who recently formed a union.
Who just formed a union. That was seemingly on a good footing, even if they are the minority. But that Honorable Nenchi stands in and gets only one vote, which means he voted himself. What happened with the others who were saying that they were forming a coalition? You could imagine where you can begin to assess and to know whether we have opposition parties in real terms or disguise. Now, if I tell you most of the times that why is the government always paying attention? Because they know that they have cobwebs in their cupboards. If I tell you today that tomorrow party militants are meeting in Daido, this night you have heavy deployment of troops. People who will meet without arms, who will meet without guns, without bulletproofs, and you start asking your question, what is this issue that is keeping the government sleepless?
Threat to public peace and others.
Yes, they will say threat to public peace, as they say. But I think that within the organogram, first, there is what we call, we have what we call free protest, that is free manifestation, if you follow the norms. In the north, what do I mean by this? A political party that is registered by the government itself has the right only to notify. And if you notify the powers that be, they are supposed to send troops, because you notify them with your itinerary, to send troops to accompany you. Now, when you are holding a meeting in a hotel, for example, or in an enclosed area, now they themselves who come there are supposed to only find out, know that all these parties here. If anything gets wrong in the hotel, we know that they are responsible. Besides that, like what happened in Bonanjo, what happened recently in Bonaberi at TK Hotel, something like that. Now, this is where the issue comes from. You don't bring people for a seminar and start saying they can tell the public peace. They are not on the street.
A seminar that was in the market, not organized by a party, but by a Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Tayon Elvis, we're going to take some newspapers now. Immaculate Fogwe takes us to the press review, and she's going to show us what the newspapers reported this week. The press review.
Newswatch exclaims, President Paul Biya appeases striking teachers as he gives out heavy financial package. He issues strict instructions for the concerns raised by teachers to be properly addressed within a specific time frame. As reported by the Guardian Post, despite budgetary constraints, Minfi Boss announces moves to pay money owed striking teachers. The Sun says opposition parties at the National Assembly unite to form a parliamentary group called Union for Change. They say they will defend the interests of the Cameroonian people at the National Assembly, amongst others. The Horizon exclaims, National Assembly Union for Change declared illegal. Constitutional Laws Committee activists say resuscitation of parliamentary group by the opposition MPs violates Section 20 of the House's standing orders. Another edition of the Guardian Post paints a picture of the Bamenda Babaju Road. The Post Weekender. Southern Cameroon's leaders meet. They agree to work together. Municipal updates. Sustainable local development in northwest and southwest regions, survival mechanisms for councils and crisis zones. Another edition of Municipal Updates states, combating urban disorder, time to review the role of municipal police. Cameroon Insider, CEMAC Day 2022. President Paul Biya says solidarity will drive post-COVID recovery. The Post. PWD of Bamenda overpowers Ash FC by securing first ever Cameroon Cup trophy. Even the Boya Catholic University saga, Bishop Michael Bibi makes startling revelation, former management roped in embezzlement, theft, fraud. Father Cases NGO sues Bishop at Vatican Court.
Thank you, Immaculate, for the press review. A quick comment, Son Derek, on the state of the Babaju Bamenda Road after the announcement made by the PM sometime last year.
Yeah, of course, the PM did said in Bamenda that when he goes back to Yaoundé a week later, the work will begin. We are seeing signs that the work is beginning during the rainy season, and that is how our system is. Wrong timing, wrong everything, and you see, the Babaju route has been a dream, and people, I think the government has slept for too long. And each time we see cars stationed ready to work, it's always during the rainy season. And later on, the next excuse is the rains have disturbed the work from going on. It's funny to know that we have project managers, experts in project management, who are given to manage these projects, and yet they don't know the right timing to do what. It's funny, and that's what we will see till maybe 2035 when we emerge.
However, we expect to see the state of that road changing as soon as possible to ease movement of persons into the northwest region of the country. Now, the teachers are still on strike, pressing on government authorities to handle their plight as fast as possible. This is this fourth week of the strike action that has elapsed. What's your opinion about this continuous pressure by teachers, despite the measures that have been taken and announced by the government on the instructions of the head of state responding to their plight?
Well, Mr. Babila, I wish you could state to me what the head of state has done, but I will not, since we don't have time. You know, the teachers...
Yes, ordered the disbursement of...
2.7 billion.
7 billion.
Which is not up to 2% of the amount that the teachers are asking for. Or you've not done your arithmetic to calculate that. It's funny, you know.
He should normally start somewhere.
Mr. Babila, what the teachers are asking for is legal and it's right. It is their legitimate right. The teachers in this nation have for too long been regarded as underdogs, been treated so badly. Remember, in the 90s, teacher salaries were slashed nearly above 50%, and the teachers have supported up to this time. So if the teachers tell you they have supported for so long, it is necessary. Sometimes when I look at some problems, I think that we should look at symptoms. When we see the symptoms, let us go for the disease. And I'm advising the Cameroon government that they should not look at these signs that the teachers are manifesting. They should look at the working conditions of the teachers. You know, the foundation of every tall building lies, or the magic of every tall buildings lies in the depth of the foundation. And the strength of every country lies in the competence, capabilities, abilities of the teachers. If we have wrong teachers, we educate wrong builders, wrong drivers, wrong accountants, wrong journalists, and the world becomes wrong. You will not imagine that teachers are scrambling or fighting for a legal 181 billion owed them. And the head of state, thank him for his effort, releases less than 2% of that. And they still go ahead to offer cars to SDOs. And then you tell me that there is no money in the coffers. If Japuma Stadium cost a whooping sum of 200 billion, 180 billion embezzled from COVID gates, and we still have money to fuel the war going on in the Anglophone regions, I think we should not minimize what the teachers are going through. It is an emergency. These teachers do not have the advantage enjoyed by others. How do you explain the fact that a custom official is a custom for just 2 years? He has an up-story building planted somewhere. A mayor, they have lands. SGOs, they have lands planted. And teachers, why will teachers always work for their nation and die poor? Teachers have become a mockery in Cameroon. Look at what happened in Cote d'Ivoire in 2016 when salaries were increased. Primary school teachers' salaries were increased as high as 300,000, above 300,000 francs. Secondary school and college teachers, 500,000 francs. And high school teachers were increased to 1 million francs and above CFA, because they want the working conditions of the teachers to be better.
They are the ones laying the foundation. Tayon Elvis, what's your analysis of this paradox? Those who are laying the foundation, those who are doing the most important work in a nation, those who are teaching the president of the republic, the ministers, the directors, and every other state official are relegated to the background and treated so poorly.
Yes, I think it's just the system in which we operate. And when you have a dictatorial system, self-centered regime manned by one man, you have those things obviously to future. And I said any country that makes an error by not paying allegiance and total respect to its or her teachers has failed on arrival. Just like what my brother said, it will be in a way that we know psychologically, when you're not psychologically okay, what you transmit as knowledge has an impact onto the children, and the whole process continues in a total negative manner. Now, what is very annoying is the fact that you have errand boys who take it upon themselves to be intimidating teachers when they pass through the classroom of teachers. As you begin to ask yourself,
Who are the errand boys?
Yes, the GOs and the SGOs are errand boys because obviously they are errand boys. They are offering services to the head of state.
Why should you refer to state officials as errand boys?
Yes, I will refer to them in that because they are offering errands. They are offering services. What is errand? Errand is services you are offered. So if you go to a place, I will tell you that when you are holding a meeting, as the meeting is being banned, most of the times you have calls from the hierarchies who will tell you this meeting should not hold. This thing should happen.
No, in the midst of this strike action, the teachers are to an extent threatened, notably by the Minister of Territorial Administration, who tells the officials you're talking about, the DOs and the SDOs on the ground, that they must ensure that the teachers go back to their classrooms. They have to ensure that the teachers go back to their classroom. And this has sounded like a threat to many of the teachers.
Which is even an error in administrative setup. Because teachers belong, they have their tutelage ministry. It's just like I was talking here of recent that territorial cannot bring Equinoxe to order or any other media organ because the tutelage ministry to our media organ is communication and National Communication Council. Now, if you come to teachers, if we go for the secondary, the tutelage ministry is the Ministry of Secondary Education. If you go to primary schools, the tutelage ministry is the Ministry of Basic Education. It means that these DOs are only acting as those who coordinate administrative affairs within the respective areas. So what are they supposed to do? They could call the Inspector of Basic Education, the divisional delegate in the area, alongside with the delegates and the principals for the level of secondary, and tell them to carry on. They are the ones who are supposed to effect. Now, it's like you jump your area and you want to come and be a specialist in my own field. It doesn't work like that. Those are symptoms of a confused system that we think that as far as we're talking about the new dawn of a country, you will not have those kind of mix-up, where ministers will wear their shoes and perform their duties accordingly, because before head of state put you Minister of Secondary Education, he knew that you could do the job. Before the head of state put you as Professor Laurent Search to the at the level of secondary basic education, he knew that they could do it. So now the question is, that's why sometimes I don't know why the minister to stay quiet, because if I sit and I am in charge of that, I don't think I will allow any minister to override and tell me what to do, because I will think that I'll be able to talk to my Minister of Communication or my colleague that, please, can you call this board to order? Communication should be a better place to call anybody to this ministry and not the GOs to go around, because that is the arrogance we put, because we have given a semblance that GOs and governors are supposed to intimidate, whereas they are supposed to guide us in the execution of the project put in place by President Paul Biya.
All right, before your reaction, let's take some interviews right now, and we'll be back in some few minutes.
We feel abandoned, I must say that, because we stay for 4, 5, 6 months without electricity. It is so heartbreaking, and I think that it is high time something be done, and done fast, because this is a peace-loving population. If they have embraced peace, what are the fallout for this population? It should be the best roads for them to have. It should be electricity and water. It should be the Menchum Power project which should go operational for this population to feel happy. Menchum has potentials of 2 dams. There's a Kasina Ala project, and there's Menchum Power project.
We have a part of the town who was not supplied during the dry season, and now, thanks to this facility, it will be possible for them to be supplied frequently from this facility, and then we will do everything to help them to continue to provide them with potable water.
Human trafficking in Cameroon is very alarming, and if I have to take the recent case of Mali, we have almost 1,000 Cameroonians in Mali, and those are a result of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a big problem in Cameroon. Why? Because when we start talking about human trafficking, we ask what exactly causes human trafficking. We say poverty. We talk about the economic situation. We talk about the political situation and the crisis. We know in the north of Cameroon, we have the Boko Haram issue. In the northwest and the southwest, we have the Anglophone problem. In the east also, we also have the refugee situation. All these are people that are vulnerable to being trafficked.
Right, you welcome back. So, Derek, when you listen to the authorities urging the teachers to go back to their classrooms in order not to jeopardize the future of young Cameroonians who are expected to be leaders of tomorrow, and at the same time not providing the solutions to their plight. What's your opinion about this reaction or these statements? Sometimes we hear them talking about patriotism. Teachers have to be patriot and so on.
Yes, I think patriotism does not mean suffer for your right. You will bear with me that, or let me just give an advice to the government, if I'm placed to. You cannot intimidate the teachers, because teaching goes with psychology. Once you intimidate them and give them the wrong psychology, they will change the curriculum, the already suffering curriculum. There is a difference between being at work and working. So they should not intimidate the teachers to be at work and not work. I think that's one thing that the government should learn. And the second thing that the government should learn is that force does not solve all problems. They should have copied their notes from the Anglophone war, that the force they use is what has provoked this. And they should understand that what the teachers are asking for is legal, is their right. I understand that teachers need to apply their consciences about the children and their future. But I also want you to understand that a hungry stomach cannot grip the chalk very well. I want you to understand that when you are hungry, you cannot dish out the knowledge effectively. Mr. Babila Jonathan, let me tell you that in as much as the teachers are fighting to get their pay, do you know that another war is soon to start in Cameroon? The war of hunger. Do you know that the prices of goods and services are increasing and the teachers are not holding money in their hands to pay? Do you know that we do not have a landlord or a house owner that will permit you stay in his or her house for 2 months because of promises? How does the government want these teachers to cope? The teachers do not, first of all, have advantages like the DOs, SDOs who work on fuel allowance, house allowance, transport allowance. Everything about them, feeding allowance is about allowances. The teachers do not have this. So they are asking what is due them. Imagine that Hamidou served the nation as a flesh man and died as a skeleton. His patriotism killed him. And I'm not sure that the too many Hamidou outside there will still want this thing to happen. The government should kindly solve their problem. If they can borrow money to build that, borrow money to do other things, they should borrow money and pay
the teachers. Tayon Elvis, is that the solution? Quickly, 1 second.
Yes, the solution is just that the government, if the government can cover money to buy state cars, the government can cover out money to buy military vehicles, brand new with arms and ammunition, then the government can cover out money also to pay the teachers. It is 181 billion. I don't think the government cannot pay.
All right.
They just borrow from another ministry that's hanging and fit in, and then they can do the balancing of the budget heads later on. They have to pay the teachers instead of intimidating them, because they'll be going and making matters worse than the way they are right now.
The solution is that teachers should be paid. They should be given the money
and not promises.
And this is where we're going to draw the curtains on this edition of The Inside. Tayon Elvis, journalist, politician, Deputy National Communications Secretary of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement political party. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.
Son Derek, civil society activist and teacher. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure always to be on your program.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today. Goodbye.